Tonight we're going to move on to the next beatitude. So let's just read through here, starting at Matthew chapter 5, verse 1. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain. And when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and he taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. As you read through those, I don't know about you, but when I read through these, my heart just longs to be this person, doesn't it? Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And then for tonight, verse 10. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. That's our job, to make sure that when they speak evil of us, it is falsely, and we didn't bring some of it upon ourselves. You know, Peter talks about that. If we're going to be persecuted, let's make sure that it's for the sake of Jesus Christ and not because we did something offensive. Those that speak all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake, rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. And so I think I wanted to share tonight just some things from around the world about the persecuted church. And so we're going to do that, and I think next Thursday, we'll actually teach on being persecuted. It's interesting, that word persecuted in the Greek. It's a word that means to put to flight, to pursue, to aggressively chase like a hunter. And so, you know, the tension in the spiritual realm, the kingdom of light fighting against the kingdom of darkness and vice versa. Every now and then it dips in, and not every now and then, it continually dips into the natural realm, and that aggression and that hatred is taken out in the natural realm. And the whole purpose of persecution is to chase you away from your faith, to get you to deny your convictions. And so that's where we have to stand strong. Now, in this country, you know, right now, at least, we don't have really a lot of persecution, not real persecution. You know, we get, if someone laughs at us at work or thinks we're crazy, you know, we think that we're being persecuted, and that is persecution. You know, things like at work, you have to say Happy Holidays. You're not allowed to say Merry Christmas, you know, and that is a form of persecution. That is a start, and it's ramping up. But when we're talking about persecution here tonight, I'm thinking of it more in terms of, you know, being imprisoned, being stoned, being beaten, being left for dead, being murdered, that type of persecution, all for the purpose of trying to put you to flight and to get you to flee from your faith and deny the one who bought you. And so in this country, at least right now, you know, our faith is exercised in a lot of different ways, but our faith is not necessarily exercised in this way yet. I think, you know, I think the culture and the environment of the United States is just very, very scary right now, very precarious. I think just a couple of little things, ripples, so to say, could send the country into anarchy and rioting. And I think there is an underlying hatred for Christians. And, you know, given the right state, in the right time, in the right environment, if anarchy breaks out, it could be, a lot of hatred could be expressed against us. And so I think it's something that we really need to think about and take seriously. For right now, thank God that we're not being persecuted that much, that harshly on a daily basis. The seven churches in Revelation is interesting, and the reason why I bring this out tonight is because, you see throughout time, you see that in different regions, the church is challenged with different trials. And you see here Ephesus and Smyrna and Pergamum. Smyrna, they were about to suffer persecution. And remember, he said that you're going to be, in fact, I think I have it here. He said, Revelation chapter 2, verse 8, "And unto the angel of the church of Smyrna write, These things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan." And then look at verse 10. "Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that you may be tried. And you shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death." So here in this, for this church here in Smyrna, what were they having to overcome? They were going to have to overcome tribulation that was coming on them. You'll see there, I put in your notes, Polycarp was martyred in Smyrna around AD 155, according to the history that we know. And so it's interesting that here John is prophesying it, and it surely did come to pass in that region, in that city. So they're having to overcome not only the tribulation, this pressure of being put to flight, to be moved away from their faith, to deny their faith, but they're also having to overcome the fear of what might happen. And I think we all have that fear. The thought of being tortured, the thought of being beaten, the thought of dying in some way. I think we all are fearful of that to certain degrees, but I just want to comfort your hearts tonight. If we were facing that, you would find the grace of God more than sufficient. And not only that, your faith would start to be exercised in that area. Our faith is not exercised in that area right now. Our faith is exercised in other areas. How to live godly in a hedonistic country. So if your faith was starting to be exercised in that area, you would find the peace and the comfort that you need to face whatever we have to face. I just love I don't know how many of you have read the story of Corrie ten Boom, but she and her sister Betsy were in a Nazi death camp, and Betsy was dying. And one of the last things, after being beaten and tortured and having forgiven the soldiers that had done terrible atrocities to them, one of the last things that Betsy said as she was dying, she said, "Corrie, we need to tell people that there is no pit. No matter how deep the pit is, God's grace always goes deeper." And she was talking, about being beaten and tortured and now lying there dying. And, when you think of Corrie ten Boom and her sister Betsy, how in the world could they forgive and love and pray for guards that had done terrible things to them? When you get there, you find out how it can be done. You find the grace of God is more than sufficient. And you find it in your heart to forgive, and you find it in your heart to face whatever it is that you need to face. Now, moving on from Smyrna, then you go to the church of the Laodiceans, and they had different problems, didn't they? Verse 17, they were saying, "I am rich, increased with goods, have need of nothing." But Jesus said, "You don't know that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked." Now see, we identify with the Laodiceans much more than Smyrna, don't we? And so I'm just showing you this to say, you go through those 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3, and maybe sometime we should teach on it because it's a great study. You see here 7 churches in 7 different spiritual conditions, facing 7 different trials of what they had to overcome. And just like Smyrna had to overcome the tribulation and the fear of the tribulation, you see here the Laodiceans, Jesus goes on And he says in verse 21, to him that overcometh. Well, they had to overcome a completely different set of problems, didn't they? They had to overcome ease. They had to overcome the prosperity of that area. Laodicea was an industrial city. People were well off. They were doing well. And so them saying, I am rich and increased with goods, more than likely they were, and have need of nothing. And that's one of the greatest atrocities of riches and prosperity is we don't think we need God anymore. And so this was their set of problems that they had to overcome, and we relate to that a whole lot more, don't we? So when we talk about suffering, and when we read tonight, I'm going to read you a testimony from overseas. And as we do this, I wanted to make some comments there in the bullet notes. Don't make comparisons or draw conclusions that one group or one temptation is superior or inferior to another. You know, a lot of times when we hear of what people are suffering overseas, I think sometimes we can not only feel guilty, but we can start to feel like, you know, those are the real Christians. What am I doing? I'm just, you know, enjoying my ice cream and my TV, and gee, I just don't feel like I even measure up. That's not the case. That's not true. Realize that God in His sovereignty has put us where we are for a reason. And, you know, if somebody over there in the persecuted church was suddenly transported over here instantly and exchanged their life for our life, and now they're living in this environment, they would probably fail at first because their faith is not exercised in how to deal with the affluence, with all of the conveniences, with all of the creature comforts that we have. And so it would be very easy for them just to be swept away by the tide of the culture. If we went over there and were transported over there and just dropped into that lifestyle, we would probably fail at first too, until we got used to it, until our faith started to be exercised in that area. And so don't make comparisons and think, well, I'm inferior to them, or, you know, gee, they must be the super Christians. They are going through horrible, horrendous battles. I'm going to read you something tonight that will really make you think. And we need to pray for them, and we need to be very much aware of what they're going through. If they can suffer the way that they're suffering, the very least we can do is to be aware and to pray and to be mindful of what our brothers and sisters are going through. I put there, as the church, we would not be complete without the temptations of those persecuted for their faith, and they would not be complete without our temptations of resisting worldly pleasure, ease, and prosperity. So we're one big church, and we are here by God's design and will. And so don't feel guilty and don't feel inferior. Just realize that our battles are different. And who knows, maybe one day, sooner than we think, we're going to be experiencing a lot of the same temptations that they go through. I also wanted to make this note as I read to you this article and probably play a short video for you. We would not embrace all persecuted people as Bible Christians. Just remember that, and this is not to speak derogatory of anybody, especially not anybody that's suffering. But there's many that embrace a mixture of Christianity. You know, if you go into South America, they have a lot of Christianity mixed in with Catholicism, mixed in with superstitions, things along those lines. You go over to Africa, and they have a lot of Christianity mixed in with voodoo and pagan religions. So I put there, many are being persecuted just for being non-Muslim. So remember that. But in the mix, just like over here in the good old USA, there are always very Bible-believing Christians living godly, holy lives. And those especially are the ones that we want to embrace and pray for. Not to the exclusion of anybody else, but just be mindful that a lot of times the stories that we hear are not necessarily Bible Christians. And so let me read you this story. We can comment on 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 7. Remember what Paul's going through here. The Corinthians are accusing him of not being a good enough apostle. and they're comparing him to other apostles, saying, well, why can't you do what he does, or why can't you measure up to him? And so he asks them, do ye look on things after the outward appearance? If any man trust to himself that he is Christ's, let him of himself think this again, that as he is Christ's, even so we are Christ's. And so I'm saying that to say, don't look on the outward appearance comparing us to them, or us to the persecuted church, thinking that we're inferior and they're superior in some way. Realize we all have our battles that we must fight and face every day. And don't look after the outward appearance. And then a few verses down, he says, for we dare not make ourselves of the number, or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, but they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not what? They're not wise. So just realize, God has them over there for a reason. God has us over here for a reason. I am really, really glad I got chosen to be over here, quite frankly, and at least for now. But that's all in God's design and God's wisdom. And so we must serve God with all of our heart where He has, in His wisdom, placed us. Remember that story at the end of John chapter 21 where Jesus tells Peter, Peter, you know, when you get old, you're going to go get very feeble. You're going to have people lead you around and carry you around. And so Peter, seeing John, says to Jesus, Lord, what shall this man do? You know, if I'm going to have a hard time getting old, you know, is he going to have a hard time getting old? And Jesus said unto him, if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? Follow thou what? Follow thou me. So it's just to say, don't compare yourself to others in terms of who is more spiritual or who is more worthy, or we all have our battles. And hopefully we will be faithful to serve God and to fight the battle that we have here facing us every day. And that's the battle against sin. That's the battle against covetousness. That's the battle against ease. That's the battle against avarice and prosperity. And coming to the place of saying, we don't need God. We've got this thing under control. I have a pretty good life. So this is a, this comes, I don't know, does anybody get the Voice of the Martyrs magazine? Do you? It's really, really good, and I would encourage you to get it. This particular issue, they have 3 testimonies in it. And this one is lengthy, so let me get rolling and get reading it here. If anyone might feel that God had failed him in the middle of persecution, Daniel's is in quotes, would be a likely candidate. Boko Haram caused the death of his wife and murdered both his brother and father. They kidnapped his sister, and another brother is missing, probably murdered by Boko Haram. He has been forced to flee multiple times when the extremists tried to kill him. But Daniel doesn't think God failed him. Instead, he has relied on God through each of these tragedies and is now serving other persecuted Christians in some of northern Nigeria's most dangerous areas. Because he's been a refugee and knows what it's like to lose family members, David is deeply passionate about helping others who face similar problems. There is nothing that gives me joy like going into the risky zones to save persecuted Christians, Daniel said. Whenever I hear of an attack on a Christian community, the first thing that comes to my mind is to go there and to help the dying believers. Stopping me from helping the persecuted Christians is like killing me. That's when you know you have a calling on your life, is when you feel like you're dying if you're not fulfilling it. Daniel grew up in a small Muslim village where his Christian family faced constant pressure. 4 of his 9 brothers and sisters were forced to convert to Islam, and Daniel was driven out of the community after speaking out against the forced conversions. Later, as he traveled to different villages in the 1990s, showing the Jesus film and preaching the gospel, he faced more opposition. Sometimes he even had stones thrown at him. Over the years, Daniel had many run-ins with Boko Haram because of his outspoken Christian witness. He recalled 6 separate incidents during which he felt that God had saved his life, including one in which members of Boko Haram came to his house, shook his hand, and asked him if he knew where Daniel was. They didn't even recognize him, miraculously. On October 24th, 2012, Boko Haram surrounded his home and refused to allow his critically ill wife to leave for medical treatment, resulting in her death. The loss really shocked me, he said. I was not able to eat, drink, or sleep for 3 days. But I encouraged myself in the Lord, and God strengthened me. Daniel's sister cared for his eight-month-old daughter while he continued his ministry. The next year, he faced tragedy again. The Islamists had been tracking him for months, and they eventually caught his brother, who looked a lot like him. I lost my brother on January 14, 2013, when the insurgents came into his house and interrogated his family. My brother refused to run away, and when they came and met him reading a Bible, they sat him down and blew off his head with an AK-47. We buried him without a head. In this loss, the Lord made my faith grow stronger. God encouraged me with Scripture. Just a few months after his brother's murder, Daniel's sister was kidnapped on her way home from school. My sister was abducted on May 15, 2013, he said. They slaughtered over 50 people in her presence, which caused her serious mental trauma. She did not eat or drink for 9 days until she escaped. Until today, she has been ill. In this, I was not shaken at all, but steadfastly prayed for her return back home. Another of Daniel's brothers disappeared shortly after his sister's kidnapping. Daniel said he was stopped by Boko Haram and discovered to have a Bible. My brother is missing since October 2, 2013, when he was caught by the insurgents, he said. We have not heard from him since then, and we wonder if he is still alive. I believe in the word of Psalms 125:1, even if my brother is dead, it will not affect my faith. Then on May 27, 2014, as Daniel traveled with other Voice of the Martyr workers to distribute relief items to Christians from Gaza, he learned that his father, Jeremiah, had been killed by the extremists. The Boko Haram insurgents knew that Jeremiah was Daniel's father. 2 of them sat down and interrogated him about his son's activities. We know your name, your family, your son Daniel, who is helping the Christian religion, they said. They ordered Jeremiah to denounce Christ, and when he refused, they killed him by shooting him in the neck. Daniel said his father's murder was the most difficult thing he had faced besides his wife's death. The loss impacted me strongly, he said. But it wasn't a negative impact. It is like a spiritual promotion for me, he explained. God will always lead the way. Daniel continues to pour out his life in service to his persecuted brothers and sisters in Nigeria. He began working with Voice of the Martyrs 2 years after meeting the medical director, Dr. Jim, and our Nigerian medical coordinator, I don't know how to pronounce that name. They had asked Daniel to facilitate a meeting with a girl who escaped from Boko Haram after being abducted. Daniel wasn't eager to talk with people he didn't know well, but the meeting changed his mind. I was surprised when they shared Voice of the Martyrs' vision for helping the persecuted. And when Jim knelt down to pray for the girl and gave a gift to her, requesting that she be reading Bible passages every day, he said, what attracted my attention was the humility demonstrated by Jim and the Voice of the Martyrs staff. Today, Daniel's primary responsibility is traveling to areas where Christians have been attacked by Boko Haram, finding those in need of medical care, transporting them for treatment, and being an advocate in getting them the best care possible. He also assists in distributing relief goods and working with abduction victims when necessary. Before I came on board, I knew already that it might be a dangerous job, he said. But that has never been my problem at all. I deal with risk with the following steps. I pray first, get some intel, recite Psalm 125:1, and then strongly believe in God for protection. Once I am done with these processes, I move forward. Though Daniel has suffered great losses and knows that others in his family could be affected any time, he draws strength from the Holy Spirit to continue his work. My internal joy remains constant, he said. I always thank the Lord for giving me the opportunity to partake in Christ's sufferings. I don't even mind even the hardest. And so I'm finished with this. I may put this on the back and you can borrow it, but there's two other testimonies of Christians in other areas, just horrendous. And so let me show you this video before we go to prayer. I just thought tonight, since we're talking about, the beatitude of blessed are those who are persecuted, I thought it would be a good time just for us to make ourselves aware of a little bit of what these people go through. We need to pray for them, and we need to be aware of what they go through.